Hello and welcome to the 32 Minutes of Heaven we call the D1Baseball Podcast. I am your host, Michael Patrick Rooney. Today's episode brought to us by our good friends at S2 Cognition. S2 Cognition delivers a revolutionary approach to helping athletes understand how in-game decisions impact their performance from youth levels all the way to the pros. I want to also say thanks to our friends at Pitch Logic, the system used by players, coaches, scouts, and instructors at all levels of play, from youth leagues to the big leagues. Easy to use and affordable technology that makes the platform accessible to every player at every level. All the metrics and features used at the highest level. See pitchlogic.com for more information. Today, it's just mano a mano, me and Kendall J. Rogers. KR, can you give us a Klein Bengals pound football update? How are the Bengals?
Yeah, so I think they won 52-0 last week. I kind of lost count. Yeah, it was not pretty.
How's Mason the Jar Rogers doing?
He's doing well. He's doing well. You know, we're trying to get him a little more aggressive at times, but he did really well.
Nice. What number is he wearing? 72?
So even though he's not a Bears fan, I don't know why he did this, but he's not a Bears fan, but he likes Refrigerator Perry. So
love that.
I guess I just need to pop some like Refrigerator Perry like videos in there and be like, hey, this is the way it's supposed to look.
I love that Mason even knows who the Refrigerator Perry is. Like, that's cross-generational. That's awesome.
He knows like more random NFL players than I probably know.
That's awesome. Love that.
Like, he'll bring up players from like 40 years ago. I'm like, I don't know who the hell that is.
Oh, it's so great. There is nothing better than youth football, because it's like nobody's really big enough and fast enough to hurt themselves. My two weight football teams were, first we were the Marple Newtown Bengals, ironically, and we were purple and gold. It was a train wreck.
Oh, and then the Bengals that are purple and gold.
Yeah, but like it was kind of like LSU, I guess. And then what I really liked was we became the Paoli Bulldogs. That was fun.
What age was that?
So the Paoli Bulldogs I did until my freshman year of high school. And then, I started playing for the Marple Bengals when I was like 8 years old. Like we were into it. Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, they're like a bunch of little bowling balls out there.
Yeah.
I will say the kids, like the skill players on the outside, like they'll do some hitting.
Oh yeah.
Like if the receiver is like running on the sideline, those DBs will do some hitting.
Man, I like, as a young boy, like, you haven't lived till you get your bell rung in football, full pad football. Like, it is. Whew, it is something. Get the wind knocked out of your chest.
I need some videos of Coach Rooney playing like 12-year-old football.
I think I have video of high school football VHS tapes out to 5.
So what position were you? DB, running back?
Yeah. In weight football, like quarterback, running back, defensive back. Like everybody plays both ways. But in high school football, I was a cornerback. Yep. D-back.
Nice. Didn't get to play for the Fighting Irish in football, huh?
No. My second team all Interac honors did not translate to playing for the Fighting Irish.
Who was the Notre Dame? Was Holt still the coach when you were at Notre Dame?
Heck yeah. My freshman year was their last national title, 1988. They were legends. So, KR, and this
quarterback on that team was
you're gonna be mad at yourself when you don't remember.
Yeah.
So great.
It wasn't
legend. It
wasn't Rick Meyer, was it?
No, well, he was afterwards. Tony Rice was
the
quarterback.
See, I wouldn't have said that.
Yeah, Rick Meyer was right after.
I was thinking Meyer.
Yeah, he was there when I was like a senior. But yeah, Notre Dame didn't lose a football game. They went 23-0 to start my college career. We didn't see them lose until Thanksgiving of my sophomore year. It was crazy.
Well, the good news for you was that the Fighting Irish won the bet against the Aggies. The bad news is NIU ate your lunch.
So bad. It was Notre Dame. All of our games are going to be on Peacock now. We're not even going to qualify for network television.
It's like the Premier League. Like you got relegated to Peacock.
Yeah. Notre Dame football, the fan base, we're at such a weird place because we love Marcus Freeman so much. Like, he's such a respectable, awesome guy. And we want him to be the answer so badly. But now we've lost to a 3-win Stanford team, Marshall, and now NIU. Like, these losses that just, no offense to those programs, that just can't happen.
Yeah, I think it kind of reminds me a little bit about like back in when A&M had Mike Sherman. and he's like the most likable dude ever, but he wasn't very good in a lot of
Yeah.
big games.
Yeah.
So,
It's
well,
crazy.
who do y'all have? Are you gonna bounce back?
Say it again.
Who do y'all have this weekend?
I have no idea. Oh, Purdue on the road.
Oh,
So
that's Leonard though, huh?
yeah, this is a road game. Yeah, this is back on the road.
Yeah, but I mean Leonard's out, right?
Hurt, but they're saying he's going to play.
But he's a running quarterback. I mean,
Yeah, with a bad shoulder, bad
Hmm.
formula. So yeah, it's our season got considerably more compelling and dramatic for all the wrong reasons.
Well, you know what else is bad is communication and the NCAA in college baseball.
That's right. That's right. So let's talk. This is a little bit of an emergency pod. Kendall and I are going to talk about the House settlement, the House versus the
Yeah.
NCAA settlement, and I'll set the stage. Kendall, so let me say this: if you're someone who's a college baseball fan, clearly,
Mhm.
and you're trying to follow all this stuff, I'm going to give you my 4 resources that I'm using to try and keep up with this. So obviously, I'm reading Kendall's articles on this because he's giving everyone the baseball view. And we're going to talk through that. Ross Dellinger, who Kendall often links and did recently, he's kind of given us the broader view. Ross Dellinger is more of a football guy. I actually listen. There's a guy, Michael McCann, who writes. He's got a legal background. He probably is a legal law professor. He writes for Sportico. Now a lot of times that's behind a paywall, but not always. I find him to be interesting as a writer and a podcast guest. And Gabe Feldman has a podcast. I don't know what it's called, but if you Google Gabe Feldman, he's a law professor at the Tulane Law School, and he has a sports law emphasis. And so anyway, he's got an enjoyable podcast that has covered this. So those are my 4 go-tos: Kendall, Ross Dellinger, Michael McCann, and Gabe Feldman. So here's the long story short. I think it's fair to say that people thought this settlement that the NCAA and the plaintiffs led by Jeffrey Kessler, it's a class action suit. This settlement where the NCAA is going to be $2.8 billion with a B of damages, and then a commitment of all the same scholarships without scholarship limits, plus 22 million per school in allowable funds going to your athletes, and that will escalate, right? That will keep increasing year over year, like a massive settlement that the NCAA, releasing a lot of funds. They thought Judge Wilkin, who's the judge of the case, was going to approve the settlement, and she surprisingly, those are my words, she surprisingly declined to grant preliminary approval of this. And I'll give you a couple of her concerns, Kendall, and then I want to get your thoughts. So one of her main concerns was, hey, this is taking NIL in-house, if you will, and it would eliminate pay for play. Like basically, if you're going to get NIL, besides the 22 million of the funds schools are giving out, if you're getting NIL, it's got to be like a real trade of value, right? Like and there's going to be a governing body there, not the NCAA. So she was saying, like, well, what if this means less money to the athletes? There's no way people are going to go for this. But the NCAA wants pay for play to go away, and so that was one thing. She was also concerned with how are you going to regulate these things. But I think the challenge is, if she's getting rid of this, the NCAA is looking at it like, well, why are we forking over 2.8 billion? Why we should just go to trial and take our chances? Like we're getting nothing in return. So that's just like a quick overview of it, Kendall. Give me your quick thoughts on this.
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is it doesn't surprise me that the judge in this case looked at the NIL rules that the NCAA wanted to put in, for instance, like a clearinghouse determining if the NIL value is like legitimate. It doesn't surprise me that she has hesitation on that, because at the end of the day, like, how does a clearinghouse know what somebody's value is? It's like anything, right? And your market value is what someone is willing to pay. In sports that don't have salary caps, a player may get asinine money, and people are like, man, why are they paying that much? Well, it's because somebody's willing to do it. So, if you're the NCAA and you're in a capitalistic society, how are you going to look at a kid and go, if I made this, I think I mentioned Joe's Taco Shack, just I made a restaurant. If they want to pay Quinn Ewers of Texas, or they want to pay Max Blue of Texas $2 million a year, like, I mean, that's their prerogative. Like, how can you tell them that's not valid? That may be worth it to them. So
Mhm.
I just don't see how you could, in the current landscape of college athletics, how you can look at any situation and go, well, they're not worth that much, because I mean, maybe they are. The market is willing to do it, so they are worth it. So I kind of relate this to like regular business, and I'll kind of go back and to like the showcase days back when I was at PG, and I always make this. I always made this comparison to this, and I still talk, and I still bring it up with people today. Is back then, people would complain and complain, and every showcase company charges, so they're not alone. But people would reach out and be like, man, I don't know why they charge so much to go to stuff. Well, I'm like, well, is the market telling them that the price should be lower? No. Okay, well then they're charging what the market is allowing them to charge. So in this situation, the market is allowing a player to make X amount of money. I don't see how you can guardrail that. Like, how can you tell somebody that they can't make money if somebody's willing to pay it? Like, I
Yeah.
don't see, again, in the current climate, how you can guardrail that at all. Unfortunately, it's going to lead to pay for play, but I don't see how you get around it without being entangled in court cases for the next 12 years.
Yeah, I think the two parts that you said there, Kendall, that are so important is
Yeah.
one is Judge Wilkin kind of said, how are you going to regulate this?
Yeah.
Like what governing body is going to say that
Yeah.
Kendall Rogers is worth $500 but not $600, right? Like
We
that's
can't regulate cheating now.
yeah.
So how are we going to regulate someone making money?
And she used that against the two attorneys,
Yeah.
Kessler for the plaintiffs and the attorney for the NCAA. She said, like, they basically said to her, like, hey, you don't understand. Pay for play is illegal now. And she said, exactly. Like,
Yeah.
you guys are doing nothing about it. But I will say this, Kendall, and this is one of my big concerns. Like, let me take my day job. In my day job, our sales team are
Yeah.
paid a certain wage that they choose to agree to go call on attorneys and doctors, to solicit business for our company, right?
Yeah.
What our salespeople cannot do, so we can't tell our salespeople what they can and can't do outside of their workspace. But here's what they can't do: they can't then start a second company and go solicit funds from our attorneys and our doctors who are our customers. Like they can't create a second funding source where, like, hey, if you're an attorney, Kendall, and my job at my day job is to call on you, and then we find out that you've got a side business where or the salesperson is a side business also like, you could see where there's an immediate conflict of interest here. Here's the problem, though: these athletes are not employees yet, right? They're just student athletes. And so I'll tell you, just to fast forward, Kendall, here's my big concerns. My big concerns are that we're not going to get this settlement. The NCAA is basically saying, look, like, we're offering $2.8 billion and $22 million per school per year, plus the scholarships, plus all the
Yeah.
other things we're offering. Like, we're
It's
offering
not
all that.
sustainable.
Yeah. And you're telling us that's not enough? Like, all right, well, then I guess we don't have a deal. So that's number one. I worry that we're going to trial, which means also appeals, and this is going to be forever. And then I also worry that where we're really going is student athletes are going to be employees. And I don't think that's going to be good for student athletes. I just don't. I think this is going to be a rude awakening for student athletes. And I'll tell you, Kendall, here's where this is going to be. My sister's an attorney. I'm about to say something that's negative towards attorneys. I don't want to come off as anti-attorney. Like in the right time and place, attorneys have an incredibly important role in American society. But in college sports, attorneys are just absolutely ping-ponging
Oh
our
yeah.
world around. And if we think that they have our best interest at heart, they don't. They're trying to win cases and win fees. And so I know they probably talk themselves into thinking they have the greater good at heart. But I'm just telling you, when these cases are over, they're going to be gone, and they're going to take their big fees and get out of here, and we're going to be left to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, here's the thing. I kind of feel like for the NCAA, just getting rid of the NIL guardrails is probably a non-starter. I mean, I'd be shocked to just lift that out of that whole settlement. If they don't, it really creates an even more chaotic situation, because if they don't come to an agreement in 3 weeks, I think
Yeah,
it's
end
what,
of
September
September. Yeah.
26th, I believe
Hmm.
they reconvene, and if they don't come to an agreement there, which I've heard some people are a little bit confident there will be an agreement, although it's about 55-45. But if they don't come to an agreement, I was told that they probably wouldn't even set a trial date until the end of next year. And if that's the case, they wouldn't even go to trial until the middle to end of 26.
Hmm.
And guess what? If you go to trial over that kind of stuff, there will be appeal after
Hmm.
appeal after appeal after appeal. Kind of goes back to what you said. Everybody wants to get paid here. So, I mean, we're in a situation to where the idea of 34 full scholarships, 34-man roster, etc. I mean, we could be looking at 2028 before we ever see this, if not longer. And it's kind of crazy. I was on the phone, like a conference call, basically, with a staff for a prominent program yesterday, and because they had read my article, like, wait a second, like, we're cutting kids, and like, there's a really good chance that like this isn't even happening for 3 or 4, potentially even 5 more years. Like, this is madness.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, like, here's the other thing, Kendall, and then we're gonna officially turn the page to baseball,
Sure.
as you kind of just started to. If I'm the NCAA, the other thing is, remember, this class action suit is about antitrust. Like, that's what this is all about. Is like
Hmm.
antitrust, right? And the NCAA is probably looking at this like, even if we do this settlement, we've only solved half our problem. We solved the antitrust problem, but what about the sex discrimination problem we've got with all these funds not going 50-50 to
Yeah.
female athletes? And so the NCAA might just be like, you know what? Why not just roll the dice in court? Because the NCAA, Michael McCann pointed this out very astutely, like, it's like the NCAA has been getting their butts kicked the last 5 or so years, whatever time period. It's not always been that way. The NCAA used to win every court case. And,
Hmm.
what if you get a jury that says, I don't want to ruin college sports. Like, I don't want to be the author of this extreme change. So I don't know, like, that part's very discouraging.
The NCAA is really in a no-win situation here.
No win. Yeah. Like
Like,
I,
even if they lift that, they're going to get hammered on something else. But the other thing too to remember on this deal is not necessarily tied to the settlement case, but like, will there be other lawsuits? Denard
yeah.
Robinson and some former Michigan players just sued the NCAA and the Big Ten Network yesterday for $50 million in NIL money. And so, like, let's say Denard Robinson gets some traction on this deal. Well, does that mean that all of a sudden, former Arizona State players get band together and go sue ASU? I think the dominoes on this deal are just now starting to fall, and I think there's a lot more to go.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing is, like, I think that's what Jeffrey Kessler is selling, who's the lead plaintiff attorney, is that,
Yeah,
hey, if you settle this case, you set a precedent against which these other lawsuits would fail. Meaning, like, you settle
but would
this.
it? That's the question.
Yeah, well, basically, I think what they're saying is, like, look,
Yeah,
the NCAA then, if they settle this, they're ponying up $2.8 billion. They're ponying up 50% of average revenues. Like, that's where the 22 million comes from. Is they're saying you take all the money being invested in student athletes plus 22 million per year in NIL, and that's 50% of the average revenues of a top athletic department. I think what they're saying is any judge would look at that and say, what do you expect? Like, that's like,
yeah.
that would be comparable with the NFL and et cetera. But I'm with you. Like, I'm very pessimistic that is all going to happen. All right, so
I mean,
let's.
I would say this, Runes. I mean, I kind of like at this stage in the game. I kind of like the idea of the athletes being employees, because imagine if you were an employee, let's say a state like Texas. You can fire someone in the state of Texas, no reasoning, nothing. You can just, well, all right, see you. Don't come to work Monday. Imagine if you were a student athlete in the state of Texas, and your scholarship you had to pay for, your food that you got every day you had to pay for. Oh, by the way, you got to do your taxes because you're an employee, and by the way, we're not doing it for you. I mean, I think a lot of student athletes, and I'm not going to blame the student athletes necessarily on this, but like a lot of lawyers, a lot of student athletes, I think would think about this thing differently if they had to basically operate as a 40-year-old adult when they're 18 years old in college.
Yeah.
I think a lot of kids would take a step back. I know I would at that age, would be like, whoa, like I don't want to deal with all this. Like I want to go play football, make a little bit of money, and let's be honest, like go party on a Saturday. Like I don't want to deal with everyday adult life stuff.
Yeah. If you're listening and you know the answer to this, here's the question that I have is, like, let's say a scholarship is worth $100,000 a year when as soon as these athletes become employees, this is the question, do those scholarships become taxable? I think the answer is yes. And so now,
Yeah.
if you're an athlete and school X is saying, hey, here's your $100,000 scholarship, and now I'm as the athlete, I have to pay $30,000 in taxes there, or $35,000. Now school X has to give me $135,000 to make me whole. So that's an issue. Here's the other issue for the student athletes, Kendall. They're going to become unionized employees, most likely. That's what I feel like this is headed. It's going to be a very weak union, very, very weak. Because
especially in certain states.
Right. And they're all different sports, and they're only there for 4 or 5 years. Like, it's the problem football has, where the careers aren't long enough. So they end up with a very weak union, whereas baseball has the strong union because their careers last longer.
Yeah, I mean, go look at, and not to get in the political rabbit hole here at all, but go look at the states where college athletics is the biggest deal. The SEC states, the Southern states, and look at how much power unions have in those states. It's not a lot. So it's kind of like a be careful what you wish for type of situation.
Yeah, no, just even at least for me, the way I'm wired, fear of the unknown is massive here. Like fear of unintended consequences. All right, so let's focus on baseball for the end here. So I wrote down 3 things. Okay, what about the 34 full scholarships? What about the roster limits? Like, these are things that I'm trying to put my coach's hat on right now. Like, what am I doing about these scholarships? Are they coming? Are they not coming? What am I doing about these roster limits? Are they coming? Are they not coming? And then roster limits dictate how I look at roster construction. Because if you're telling me I can only have 34 spots, I'm putting my roster together very differently than if you tell me I can have 40 spots. Meaning, like, do I have to have more kids that can play multiple positions? Do I have to recruit more two-way players? Those types of things. So go ahead, Kendall. What are you hearing from coaches on this besides exasperation?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I was talking to a couple of coaches yesterday, and I would actually advise coaches not to cut anyone else at the high school level. I mean, I wouldn't, just because, it's like I was telling a prominent coach yesterday, is like, even though it has nothing to do with you and it's not your fault, I mean, cutting a kid right now when you don't even know what's going to happen is tough, because what happens if you're, let's say you're Arizona State and you go cut a kid, and let's just say this goes to trial, and you're not trimming your roster down for another 4 years. Well, then you go back to the kid. And he's like, no, hell no, I'm not going back to Arizona State. You just cut me. So I would actually recommend coaches not cut anybody until this final decision is made later this month. You know what? If they come to an agreement, then it's kind of back. It's back on, right? 34 roster spots next year, 34 potentially, if you choose to do so, full scholarships. And so that's one thing. The other thing that's going to be interesting to me is just to see, again, when we find out how many scholarship schools are going to have. I mean, right now, in the last month, a couple of the prominent conferences told me that they would have kind of guidance on this to schools with some of these mandates, some of these rules, right before the early signing period. I mean, that's what November 5th or 6th, something like that. So, I mean, at this stage, as of right now, they can't give guidance on anything. And so, again, everything kind of revolves around that decision later this month. But again, I will tell coaches and tell fans, if they come to an agreement, what will happen is 34 next year, 34 roster spots next year, the potential to have 34 full scholarships. If it goes to trial, I mean, you're staying at 40, you're staying at 11-7, you're staying at the same number of counters, and it's business as usual.
Yep. I'll tell you what I would love to see, Kendall. And again, I want to say this up front. What I'm about to suggest is Fantasy Island. It's me being an extreme optimist. It's also me being biased because it's something that I believe very strongly is for the greater good of our sport. But right now, coaches are trying to contend with this. It's possible that this is a possibility that next fall, I'm going to only be allowed to have 34 bodies on my roster. Like, that's a real possibility right now. Now it's
At the
starting to look,
beginning of the fall,
yeah.
you
And
could.
so,
That's not official, but like that's a
yeah,
possibility.
it's a possibility. It's getting lower and lower percentage by the day, but it's a real possibility. And that's a violent change for a lot of schools that have had, fall rosters 48, 49, 50, 51, 52. What I think would be amazing is if college baseball, now this would require everyone to come together and agree, which again is why it's so low percentage. But I would say if I was college baseball, it would be this. Look, let's do a preemptive strike. Let's all decide collectively that next fall when school starts, our rosters have to be 40. So don't do 34.
Yeah.
That's too extreme. Let's do 40. And I think the way I would sell it to the big schools is like, I'd say, look, players 41 through 48, you don't really need those players. Those are insurance policies. And you'd be better off letting those 8 kids go to schools that are not as prominent as yours, get a year of repetitions. And if they're who you think they are, then you can recruit them. Like that's what the portal's for, or what the portal's become right now. But and then if we do get stuck with this 34 in the fall, it's not nearly as violent because our whole sport is acclimating to 40 kids in the fall. But right now, where we're all like in the 47 to 50 range in the fall, to go to 34, that's a violent whipsaw. So, but again, this would require
I've seen a
everyone.
fall roster already with 56 players on it.
Yeah, it's just and again, we're not passing judgment. We understand
for sure.
the coaches that have the wherewithal to get 56 players, they're doing this not because they're bad people. They're doing this because they have no control of their roster. Everyone can disappear. Recruits can disappear. Kids can transfer. They have no roster certainty. So how do they compensate? They compensate by collecting players and just like you sorted out at the end. So that would be my preemptive strike. I get it. It's a little fantasy island. It's a little Pollyanna. But I do think that, if 34 is coming down the pike, which maybe it is, and I also, again, I want to make this point, Kendall. I think it would be, if you're the schools that have the advantages that allow you to have 46 players in the fall, I think you'd be better off long-term not doing that, because players 41 through 48, 40, whatever, they're not getting better. They're not. They're just wasting away. They're playing a little bit of fall baseball, and then they're watching baseball. I just don't think that's for the best.
Yeah, I just don't think we have any end in sight right now. I was just thinking about it while you were talking, and the concern I have is that right now no one can sue the idea of 34 the 34-man roster, 34 full scholarships, and they can't sue schools or the NCAA based on what other sports are getting. Why? Because this actually isn't legislation yet. Imagine if they come to an agreement to do all these different things, then these sports that feel like they're getting shafted will come out of the woodwork and start suing everybody. So I honestly think we're going to be sitting here for another 4 or 5 years until we have a resolution. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing. The settlement's the only hope of like turning the page and moving forward. It's like the only defense, but man, again, I know this is coming off.
I think the settlement case, honestly, is just delaying the inevitable. I think it really is. Like it's kicking the can down the road to some degree, because I think we're going to be going through suits for years.
Yeah. Well, my impression of the settlement, KR, is this. It's to make the NCAA harder to sue, because it's just ridiculous now. It's like every day we wake up and somebody new suing the NCAA. It's almost comical. So the idea is to make the settlement becomes a precedent that makes them harder to sue. And then I'm messing up the legal terminology clearly, but and then it's also about a message to Congress, like, help us maintain some antitrust. But again, like you said, Kendall, even if the settlement happens, we've kicked the sex discrimination can, the Title IX can down the road. Like, what about that? Like that's just like this tsunami that's looming out there. So again, I know this is pessimistic, and I we don't like to take a negative tone on these podcasts, but we
Yeah.
also don't like to. We have to be realistic. And I thought it would be really interesting to talk about what coaches are feeling right now, because they have to. Coach's job. You're the CEO of your program. You have to look ahead, right? Like, you have to forecast what's coming. And man, I don't want to say I feel terrible for these guys, because that's a weird way to say it. Like,
Yeah.
I have great empathy for coaches right now. I can't even imagine what it's like to try and plan your college baseball program 3 to 5 years down the road right now.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing here is let's say they do come to an agreement, is how many full scholarships will some programs have?
Yeah.
I know the SEC's thought about mandating a certain number, allowing schools to do whatever the heck they want. The ACC kind of the same way. There's at least one ACC program that I was told, like matter of factly, that will be 34 full scholarships. So, I mean, if a program like that is going to do it, who else is going to do it? You kind of feel like that's going to be probably a pretty sizable number, and it's going to force some of these schools to go, well, we were only going to give 24, but hell, if they're doing it, we better give 34. So I think what the conferences do will also be very interesting. Like, do they make it where you can't go over 24 or 25, or do they just say, you know what, in this day and age, we don't want to get sued by our member schools. See Florida State and ACC. We don't want to get sued by member schools. So you know what, you guys do whatever the hell you want to do. We're stepping out of the way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I haven't asked any coaches this, KR, but what I'm picturing is, like, if you're a head coach right now, you have like a master plan for your program, like kind of how you
Yeah.
operate. But in 2024, you need 4 of them, right? Like,
Oh
you
yeah.
need plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. Like, it's just like your contingencies need contingencies. It's got to be crazy.
Yeah. I was talking to a coach yesterday that was basically just like, man, I don't even know why I'm doing this anymore. It's kind of, it's funny, but it's also kind of sad. Like, this is a
Yeah.
pretty prominent coach. And they're like, man, this is a joke. Like, this whole
Yeah.
situation is an absolute joke. And in terms of, not only just the drama around it, but also just the unknown. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
you're literally less at this point. If they come to an agreement, you're less than a year away from needing to trim the roster about 6 players. And oh, by the way, your scholarship situation is totally the opposite of what it was.
Yeah. It's
Good
crazy.
luck.
Yeah. I will say this, like, here's a positive note to end on. When the settlement first happened, college baseball, I'm speaking very broadly. College baseball got really good news. Like, 11.7 to 34 scholarships
Yeah.
is massively good news. And I also think we got treated like a major sport. And for the first time, I would say ever. And so that second thing I just said is still in play. As changes happen, I still feel like college baseball is in
Agreed.
really good position. We're not perfect. There are things that we all feel passionately need to change or improve, but man, are we in a good position. And the credit goes to the players and the coaches, and coaches like Wayne Graham, who just passed. Like, that generation of coaches. I think about some of them that are deceased now, and like Augie and Mike Gillespie, and man, like that era of coach was Ron Frazier. They're the godfathers of our sport. So I think the news for college baseball is massively positive. Like, we're really in a great spot. The news for college sports right now, the
Yeah.
truth is, it's not massively positive. It's just more
Yeah, college
uncertainty.
baseball, it's just like college baseball's in a great spot. It's just frustrating to not know the finality of the situation. But I
Yeah,
do think whenever there is a final decision to be made, that the sport will be in a pretty good spot still.
I agree.
I
It's
don't
like,
think we're losing. I don't think we're losing any like scholarships or anything like I don't think we're going to drop down from that 34 number at all.
yeah.
But it's just a matter of like, when is this actually going to happen?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's well said, right there. So, Kara,
Imagine if like
good.
Arizona, I think about how great this is going to be for the sport. Like, imagine if Arizona State back in your heyday at ASU had full scholarships. Like, y'all are already really good. You
Yeah.
guys would have been insane.
I mean, like, just, and some of the stuff, like, Dustin Pedroia was basically a walk-on for 2 of his 3 years. It's just like, like that, like Willie
A Hall of
Bloomquist.
Famer.
Yeah, Willie Bloomquist, his junior year, his dad had a really successful dental practice, and we had Andrew Beinbrink, who was our third baseman coming back for
Yeah.
his senior year, and Andrew had lost his father. And so finances were trickier for the Beinbrink family. And the Bloomquists basically gave Willie's scholarship to Andrew Beinbrink. Like that's a really cool story. Like it's a really heartwarming story. It's also complete nonsense that it has, like that Willie Bloomquist, a 14-year big leaguer, played baseball, paid full freight to talk about pay to play, right? Like, so anyway, just crazy. So, hey, I want to plug something, Kendall.
Sure.
I have the Sunday night conversations coming up. They start this Sunday, which is September 15th. I could not be more fired up. This week's theme, so my guests are Tracy Smith at Michigan, Ben Greenspan at Northwestern, and the topic is Big Ten baseball. Because if you think about the 2010s, I feel like their Indiana teams with Kyle Schwarber kind of kicked off an awesome decade for that league. Indiana goes to Omaha in 2013. Illinois is a top 8 national seed in 2015. Michigan plays in Game 3 of the CWS Finals in 2019. And the truth is, the pandemic really messed up Big Ten baseball. I mean, you could argue that the league did not, they did not adjust very well. But the truth is, there was real momentum in the Big Ten, and then the pandemic just wrecked it. And I feel like the Big Ten's in a real inflection point right now. You've got 4 new West Coast teams. And so that's what I want to talk to Tracy and Ben about is, hey, they were there in the beginning with Indiana. Then they were at Arizona State and had a really good run there. And then now they're back in the Big Ten. I'm super pumped because I think the Big Ten is so important for college baseball.
Yeah, and Tracy will have opinions.
That's my favorite part. That's why he's the perfect guest. He's a great interview, man. Tracy's really good in the media. Very honest and very bright, very insightful. So, and we have all kinds of really cool topics that we'll continue to promote.
Yeah, we have Murph coming down the pike too, right?
Well, we're not touching that till they win the World Series. Is
that what he told you?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like I'm saying, I don't want to mess with him until. But yes, my plan is to have a conversation with Murph in the off season once they are done with their season.
Okay.
But yes, but we are very much rooting for the Brewers and the Cubs. That is the Rooney household. So very good. KR, well done. Great job on the piece, by the way. This stuff's not easy to write. It is so technical and legal, and you did a great job on that piece.
Yeah, it can be ultra confusing, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's it. Very good. So, all right, everybody. Yeah, look out for those Sunday night conversations. We'll promote those on Twitter, and have a great week. We will catch you next time on the D1 Baseball Podcast.